Friends, analytics practitioners, DBT enthusiasts of all stripes, I'm so excited to welcome you here today to our 2025 State of Analytics Engineering Report webinar. This webinar accompanies the quantitative report where we surveyed analytics professionals across the industry to ask them how they are doing their jobs today. And I highly recommend you check that report out for a quantitative view of the industry. Today's discussion is going to be a bit more qualitative. We're going to talk about what is on our minds, the trends, the topics that we are discussing in person at DBT meetups across the globe. You might be wondering, who are you to tell me about this? And to that I say, my name is Jason Ganz. I am the head of developer experience and community here at DBT Labs. And I've been hosting these webinars for a few years now as a chance for all of us to get together and talk about what's happening. And we will get there in just 1 second. But before we do, I want to give you an invitation to Coalesce, which this year is happening in Las Vegas and online from October 13th to 16th, 2025. If you are interested in analytics engineering, then there is simply no place better in the world to be from the dates of October 13th to October 2016th, 2025 than in Las Vegas or online. You can join us from anywhere and we will be excited to have you. Now, just a bit of housekeeping before we dive in. First of all, for Q&A, please use the Q&A tab for all of your questions. Then use the chat tab to banter, hang out, tell us where you are calling in from, what you had for breakfast, just anything that's on the top of your mind. We will be sending out the recording for this webinar within 24 hours of the event. So I know you're all going to want to play this back, and we are here for you with that. And then finally, at the end, please make sure to take the survey. We want to know that we are using your time wisely and that we are discussing the things that are most interesting and relevant for you. With that, let's dive in. Alrighty, now for the main event. I am going to bring my good friends Yannick Misteli and Jenna Jordan to the stage. These are two experts kind of at the top of various parts of the industry, and I'm really excited to talk to each of them because they each provide a unique and interesting view into how analytics work is progressing today. And with that, I'd like to welcome to the stage my good friends Yannick Misteli and Jenna Jordan to talk about what is the state of analytics engineering today. Yannick and Jenna both present a really interesting, unique, and multifaceted view of the industry. So I'm thrilled to have them come and talk to us about where we've been, where we are now, and just a little bit about where we might be going. So I want to have each of them introduce themselves to our audience. Let's start off with Yannick. Yannick, what brings you to our fine webinar today?
Hey, hello everybody. I'm Yannick. Working at Roche or Genentech, which is a big pharma company, and I'm looking after the data and analytics there for the pharma commercial line of businesses, not only for global functions, but also we support all the affiliates. So it's quite nice to see all the differences all around the world when it comes to data and analytics within Roche. And before that, I was working as consultant. And my background is very much, data. So I did my PhD in quantum physics and high performance computing. So there I produced terabytes of data, of messy data. And I think it's karma now because now I need to analyze all of this data. And I've been a very early on DBT user. I think 0.12 was the first version that I started to introduce in Roche as open source. And then also we moved a lot of workloads also into DBT Cloud over the last 3 years.
And OG, yeah, one of my favorite things about Yannick is you moved from quantum computing to building data pipelines, and so we have to know that this is hard if it's taking the quantum computing energy. But yeah, Yannick and his team really are at the forefront to me of kind of developing global scale data solutions, deploying them worldwide, and really thinking about how to solve big problems and big problems early. I've noticed a pattern where Yannick's team will be working on something, and then 6 months later, a year later, kind of a wider group of people are working on it. So a great person to talk through, be like, where kind of global and enterprise scale development going? And that brings us to our next presenter, Jenna Jordan. Jenna, what brings you to our webinar today?
Hi, I'm Jenna. I'm a senior consultant with Analytics 8, which is a data and analytics consultancy. I got started using DBT when I was with the City of Boston analytics team and helped to initiate their DBT project and transition a lot of custom built data pipelines over to DBT. And I'm still hearing about all of the exciting things they're building on top of that DBT project, including a metrics library. Since working with Analytics 8, my main focus has been on building out DBT mesh projects, which has a whole new dimension of complexity and scale that I've found really fascinating. And I really appreciate the data mesh paradigm and how much of the people and process that brings to working with data rather than the focus just on technology.
Awesome. Yeah. Jenna, you ran one of my absolute favorite sessions at Coalesce last year, which was a kind of like hands-on live action game slash workshop where you go and actually talk out the complexities of building a mesh. And really, I think it was the work for the City of Boston that really struck me. One of the things that's been kind of a long-term passion and interest here is seeing how, analytics engineering started very specifically in tech-forward industries, but now we're seeing it in government use cases, we're seeing it in healthcare, we're seeing it all over the place. So the broad diffusion of analytics and analytics engineering is one of the things that has been a theme that we've been talking about for years on this very webinar. Okay, so the reason we call this the State of Analytics Engineering webinar is because we like to use this as a yearly checkpoint to talk about what is going on in the industry. There's a lot going on, and it feels like every day we're getting blasted with this is the big new thing, this is going to change anything. And the interesting thing that I noticed is that doing these every year, it's like some things really do change, and some things really don't. So where I want to start us off for the 2025 State of Analytics Engineering is, what is the biggest difference in analytics engineering and data now versus a year ago? What has actually changed in the day-to-day work that you're doing? Yannick, why don't you start us off?
Sure. I think I have a very unpopular opinion here that not that much changed, actually. But I think it's a good thing, right? I think sometimes also to have the stability to actually deliver value is very important. And that's why for me also from 24 to 25, I see it more as a transition period or a preparation period for the new things that are going to come, which we'll also be talking about, which I'm super excited. But for me, the ways of working in the past 1 year, I see that has not been changed dramatically yet. But I also feel we're getting ready for the next transformation that will be happening in multiple areas in data, right? But for me, I think the stability also was good because sometimes we're a bit overwhelmed with too much change. So I actually appreciate that for from 2024 to 2025, there were actually not that dramatic changes.
Okay, can you give us just a bit on what the things that you're seeing coming over the horizon are?
I mean, I'm super excited about SDF. I'm super excited about small things like the Visual Studio add-on, So I think those things will definitely change the ways of working more dramatically to what we have seen in the last year.
Awesome. One of my other, we're going to bring up a lot of my favorite three-letter acronyms over the course of this, and yeah, SDF is definitely on that list. Very cool. All right, Jenna. What what do you think has changed?
I think it probably depends a lot on the individual organizations and where they are in their journey. Um, but I will say that now compared to a year ago, I think that the very large organizations who maybe need those capabilities that DBT Mesh provides, it's if you compare where DBT Mesh was at a year ago versus now, I think it's at a state of maturity where it is reasonable for organizations to actually implement DBT Mesh. And I think personally what I've seen in my work, and that is a very limited view, is that is where organizations that have mature DBT projects are moving to, especially those that have grown in scope so much that they have accumulated many, many models and need to bring some further organization to it, as well as large enterprises that are looking to get in on the goodness that DBT has to offer. DBT Mesh offers some of the features that become really important at that large scale and larger complexity. So I think that smaller organizations who have had DBT projects for a long time, and anybody who has had a DBT project and seen it grow over time, they're now thinking about what does it look like for a fully mature data pipeline across all aspects of the organization to run, to have observability, to know really what the state of your data quality is like, and bringing those benefits to maybe departments or parts of the organization that haven't been able to previously benefit from that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And so what that sounds like to me is that the past year was a lot about the maturing of the analytics development life cycle, where things like DBT Mesh, which Yannick, you guys had one of the early mesh deployments, I think before we were even calling it that, are starting to kind of get more widespread, and we're starting to build out the norms and processes beyond them. And then some of the more forward-looking things like Iceberg and multi-platform, we're starting to see those get deployed, and we're starting to have kind of the forward-looking shops start to get on those. It's so funny to me. So last year, the big question in the webinar that we were discussing is AI actually going to be useful as part of the analytics development lifecycle? And we'll get into this in a bit, and I know that each of you have some different takes. But to me, as someone that I'm no longer a day-to-day data practitioner, although sometimes I wish I was. When I'm out there and I'm writing code these days, I am for sure getting a little help from a large language model to assist me out there. And I have just found that as a way for I think at this point you would call me a business stakeholder. As a business stakeholder, to kind of like drop in and get a first pass together, it's so helpful for scaffolding out, as well as for doing simple things like getting your documentation in place, getting your testing in place. The DBT Copilot functionality and kind of like using AI development workflows is for me the biggest change when I am able to kind of like get in there and get my hands dirty. So we've got a lot more AI talk coming up in just a second. I want to talk through. So this is the State of Analytics Engineering webinar, and so I want to talk through this kind of from a role and persona perspective a bit. So we talked about like what's the differences in the tech, but I want to go through kind of the big three roles that we see engaging in the DBT community the most? And there's a lot of different roles, but these are ones where I think it's interesting to check in and see how are you thinking, Yannick, how are you thinking about these roles kind of in your organization? Jenna, how are you seeing these across different teams? And the first, of course, is the analytics engineer. In a few sentences, Jenna, what's the role of the analytics engineer in the data team of 2025?
I think analytics engineer, the role started out kind of taking on some of the scope of the work of analysts and some of the scope of data engineers. And I think it probably looks a little bit different at every organization, how they decide to chop up that work. And I think that we're continuing to see more of a blurring of the lines between those roles. And so, the analytics engineer may continue to move left and take on more of the traditionally data engineering tasks, or they may move right and start talking a lot more to stakeholders and trying to bring that perspective into the data pipelines. We talk about data quality in particular. In order to improve data quality, you need to know what your stakeholders actually care about and are looking at and are seeing in your data. And so bringing the stakeholder perspective into what tests you're choosing to implement. So I think that there's still room for the analytics engineer to expand both into traditional analyst roles or traditional data engineering roles. On the other hand, I have also seen kind of the scope of the analytics engineer getting narrower and the data engineer taking on some of those DBT-oriented tasks, and analysts being able to move further left and taking on some of the engineering tasks. And so I think regardless of what your title is, when you're performing an analytics engineering function of working within DBT, the things that you are able to do and the things that you can bring to the DBT project continue to expand. In particular, I think we're seeing an expansion into data governance activities, and would love to see maybe like governance engineers come into existence. Somebody with a data governance perspective, assuming more engineering type activities and bringing that into projects. I think we're just seeing an expansion of scope in what a DBT project can fulfill. And regardless of what your actual title is, I think that's really exciting.
Awesome. So what I'm hearing from you is that there's kind of like a general understanding that the analytics engineer sits at the intersection of kind of the business facing domain expertise roles and the technical facing roles. But really, if you break down the specific jobs to be done, there are some organizations where the analytics engineer is kind of like more firmly at the data modeling stage, and some where they are kind of like reaching the tendrils of their DAG outwards to both more business facing and more technical tasks. That a good summary?
Yeah.
Fascinating. Awesome. Yannick, how are you thinking about this?
Well, I think it's interesting to see how the analytics engineering role will also evolve with the tools, right? Because I think the roles always also evolve with the tools. So we will definitely see also that the analytics engineers will get more productive with all the new capabilities that will come. But I agree, it's a very interesting intersection, right? In our company, we have clear analyst roles, analytics engineering roles, and then visual analytics roles. But of course, in smaller companies, you might fill or need to wear 3 hats to fill that. For us, we have the luxury to have dedicated folks that are doing that. What I also see is that the analytics engineers are also thinking more about the data modeling part, which was always a critical piece for me that was kind of missing a little bit, right? Because
Yeah.
it's very fast. You can build data models in DBT very fast, but sometimes you also should take one or two steps back and think about how do I do my data architecture? How does that make actually sense? Which also means you need to iterate many times, right? You need to maybe go with a slightly different schema. But I think for me, the data modeling aspect is also something that is a bit overlooked, which I think will gain more and more importance also in the coming age with AI as well, right? Where you need to have a very good understanding how you model your data in order to make that available to agents or whatnot, right? So again, I think for me, analytics engineers, I see it also in my organization. They start to become much more knowledgeable about the data modeling aspects and start to pay a lot more attention to that as well.
Really smart. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so it sounds like you have a pretty crisp delineation between the three roles. Can you just give us like a sense, like where do you set the boundaries?
So for us, the analysts, they're also savvy in SQL. I mean, they can write SQLs, but they are having the conversation with the business in order to define the business rules that we should implement. And then mostly they hand it over to the analytics engineers that then do the data pipeline and implementation to really productionalize it.
Yep.
And on top of that, then the visual analytics engineers, they're the folks that are using Click, ThoughtSpot, Tableau, etc., that are building then the Tableau or Click dashboards out of the backend.
Great. Do you have like established ratios for like how you think of like X number across each of these?
I mean, usually I would say it's maybe 3-1, something like that. But it's very fluid, right? If you have very good analysts, I think they can produce a lot of good business logic. And then if, of course, then if the analytics engineers are very senior, they can be also very fast in implementing them with the best practices. So I think why we have more analysts is because it usually takes a long time to discuss with business what should be the logic. But once you have figured this out, the rest is more technical and can be more streamlined, right?
Really interesting. Really interesting. Yeah, I think like that's one of the most common questions that we get is both where are the lines and then where are the relative ratios across the roles. So I'm curious, people in the chat, like how do you think about the lines? How do you think about the ratios between the different roles? Because that's one of the things that as the industry continues to I lean like either we're developing best practices and we will like get a solid understanding around this, or everything's moving so quickly that it's actually challenging to know that right now. So I go back and forth. But speaking of things that are moving quickly, artificial intelligence. It's the talk of the town. So last year's webinar we were dipping our toe in. I think that there was some industry-wide skepticism about how real is this thing. You certainly don't want to speak for anyone else on this call, but for 80% of the respondents to the survey and from the conversations I've been having, it's pretty real and picking up steam at a some would say exciting, some would say alarming pace. But at the same time, we also need to remember the fundamentals. So 80% of respondents are using AI in some way in their workflows. But AI, like it's kind of like computers. Like what does it actually mean? Like you're using computers in your workflow, you're using AI in your workflow. There's a huge variety of what that could mean. Jenna, how are you seeing people use AI in their analytics engineering workflows today?
So personally, I'm one of the latecomers. I have not been using AI in my day-to-day workflow as much. But I think that the code gen aspect is extremely popular. Personally, I'm a fan of the DBT code gen package for templating things out. But I think that has been a major driver in particular because where AI is really complementary, where it can be complementary, is reducing the drudgery, right? There are certain things that you just don't want to do by hand if you don't have to. So I'm thinking of like generating out all of those massive YAML files once you have, define your sources. If you've got a table with a ton of columns, and there are things that need to be in your project, but you don't want to do it by hand. And you can get a start at that, at least, through some code gen tools. And I think in general, there's a desire to focus more on the things that matter, the things that are going to really drive an impact at the organization. And if you can free up your time in order to focus on those key activities, which often may be less technical in nature or may involve taking a step back and looking at the overall architecture, being able to take the time really to focus on your data modeling activities, then if you can have AI supplement the work in the kind of the less creative, more of the daily drudgery type work, then you can take that time as a creative human being to focus on improving your data model, talking with stakeholders to figure out what they care about, what they need, and then I think overall we can have a much better result if we can focus on the things that we're uniquely good at.
Awesome. So it sounds like you're seeing it as an accelerant, if I were to put this into DBT Labs language, like a way to move up the stack, whereas like before, we spent a lot of time focusing on going and like updating specific YAML files and things like that, and it was taking up a lot of our brain space. Now these tools, we're starting to see them kind of like help people abstract away that level of work and then focus on the kind of more human-facing, more unclear, and put their focus areas there.
Yeah, and that really applies to the people who have been doing that work all along. I think the flip side is when you have those AI capabilities to help get started, and maybe you're not super confident in SQL, maybe you don't know what is supposed to be in the YAML file, but you want to be a part of this world, you want to move up the stack and contribute to the DBT project, or you want to start playing around and experimenting, then this gives you a way to actually get started. It opens those doors.
I have a list of words on my wall that I told myself I wasn't going to say on this call, and vibe coding is one of those words. And yet, I gotta say, vibe coding a DBT project. I'm curious if anyone has done it, and what the results have been. Okay, super cool, Jenna. Yannick, how are you thinking about AI in your workflows and your team's workflows?
So I can connect to the three roles that we were talking before, right? So the analyst role, ideally, I would like to give AI to the business stakeholders, that they have a conversation with the AI first, and then they come to the analyst, and then we will be much faster because then the business already knows more or less what they want, right? So I think there can be a lot of value in defining the requirements much better by business talking already with the AI to figure out what they need, right? And then, of course, for the analytics engineer, I think also there's a lot of opportunities for them to be more productive in writing DBT code. I think this is also something that we will see also with DBT Copilot and whatnot. I think there's great opportunities to be just more efficient or faster and better. Also, code quality can increase through AI. I think this is for me also a very important aspect. And then lastly, also the visual analytics. On the visual analytics side, I think this is the area which for me is probably the most exciting as well, because you can start to talk to your data, right? And I think the BI tools are evolving, and that's also where the people around these technologies need to evolve with. And I think that's also exciting to see what will happen in the BI space there, because a lot of great things can happen there. We've already deployed tools that have integrated text to SQL capabilities that are producing charts for you. So I think, of course, there is also tremendous potential on that aspect.
Yeah, I think that's a really good breakdown, and like it's helpful to disaggregate here because this is going to affect a lot of things. So we've started laying out. Tristan has laid out his view of kind of like how AI is going to affect data engineering and how AI is going to affect BI over the coming years, which we can drop those links in chat. I suggest everyone read them. But yeah, it really aligns with what you're saying there, Yannick, which is like we're just going to have access to our data kind of like flexibly and intelligently to be able to ask questions of it. It's funny when I remember when ChatGPT first came out and we first started talking about like is like talk to your data valuable? And like I think that there was some justified skepticism. People were like, how much do you actually want to do this? And then like just speaking for myself, like we use Notion here at DBT Labs. And I use like anytime I have a question that's like when's our like upcoming like company event, or like what is X team working on? It's like the first thing I do now is I always ask it. It's not always right, and critically it has to be grounded in actual truth signals. But it has to me gotten to the level of just like this is my first entry point to a question. And we have exciting things that we're working on around this. There's a lot of movement in the industry, but it feels to me like it's just obvious that if I want to know a question about my data, about my DBT project, I'm going to be going to some sort of chat interface first, and then I'm going to be as I will very quickly hit the limits of my knowledge, and then I will go and talk to one of the experts on our data team and have them kindly explain to me what this metric actually is calculating.
But I think there is also, if I may add, right? I mean, there's also still some limitation also to call that out, right? I mean, my teams, they have also been using LLMs to translate Informatica pipelines to DBT code. I mean, it works, it's okay, right? But to be honest, if I'm using these LLMs myself, I still feel, it's very isolated because they don't have the full context of my entire code base. They don't have the full context of the standards that I want, right? So I think, yes, they're already useful. But again, I think, as I said in the beginning, I think we're in this transition period where the things only start to get really, really useful because there are all these missing parts, right?
Yes.
People are hyped about AI agents. I think we're not there yet. I think we really need to work on the basics first. And I think this is where I see things coming together slowly. But for me, it's still limited, but already useful, right?
Yes. Okay. So you said my favorite word there, context, which connects to another one of the three-letter acronyms that has been lighting up my life recently with MCP, or Model Context Protocol. So like you're completely right in that it has been a challenge to get, particularly for data practitioners, but really for a wide variety of AI use cases, it's been so challenging to get the context that is needed from whatever source system that you're having into the LLM. And that has been, to me, kind of the thing that has been keeping back the widespread usefulness for bringing your data into downstream data applications. So we now have an early version of the dbt MCP server out there, say that 5 times fast. And that being just our initial way of saying that the data teams now are empowered to serve the context of your internal data to the rest of your organization. And I personally, I had this existential crisis where I was like, okay, why were we all focused on the modern data stack as like the massive tech trend before the AI wave? Like, was it just an accident of history? But what I've come to, and I'm curious to hear both of your takes, is that actually the ability to centralize your data to have a single source of truth is actually more important now than it has been ever, because as your different AI systems are looking, you can connect everyone's going to have 600 MCPs or like whatever different way it is, but fundamentally you are going to have some mechanism of determining the kind of like hierarchy of truth there. And there are many ways to define the analytics engineering and data profession. But like one way that like has always resonated with me is like you're establishing a model of truth for your organization, and that's something that is going to continue to rise in importance as we develop the mechanisms to bring that out. Jenna, how's that land with you?
So I think that this is the flip side of the previous question, honestly, a bit more interesting to me, rather than how are analytics engineers using AI to build out their data pipelines, how are analytics engineers changing how they work and build out data pipelines with the knowledge that other people are going to be using AI to interact with it. And so I think context is key, as always, in order to successfully use an LLM to get something resembling the truth out of your systems. You need to be able to provide as much context as possible. And this is where we really need to go back to basics and focus on data modeling, right? If you are trying to query your data, talk to your data, there are a lot of steps you can do in order to make sure that what the LLM tells you might be the number is actually closer to what the number is. And so modeling out your data, so that it is something that makes sense. So you can think of a Kimball dimensional model in particular is probably one of the most classic examples. There's Data Vault, there's other modeling methodologies, but you're applying organization, you're embedding meaning in that organization when you are modeling your data. But that's not quite sufficient either. It gets you closer, but it's not enough. And so that's where something like the semantic layer can come into play. It's an additional level of modeling and defining out how anybody should interact with your data. I think the semantic layer, like the original value proposition was analysts, people were calculating out a metric, the same metric many different ways and coming up with different numbers, which was decreasing trust in the data. And now we have LLMs sometimes interacting with our data and asking those same questions. And we want for our data systems to be able to return the same metric when they're asked in slightly different ways. And if you are defining out your metrics within the semantic layer, that is one way that you can increase the likelihood that you are going to get the right answer back. And in terms of context, actually writing out documentation writing out full descriptions, the more context that you provide when you're inputting in. And so that's where I'm actually not a fan of using AI to write documentation. I think there's limited extra value if you are using an AI to consume documentation as well as write documentation. You get a bit of an Ouroboros situation there. And so focusing on writing good documentation of your well-modeled data that you have told a query engine how it should query that data. Those are all steps that you can take so that by the end, when you're interacting with the data, you can get more consistent and reliable results. And I'll point to your work building off of Juan Ciqueda's work as a good example for how we can show that there is an improvement in the results returned when you have something like the semantic layer, DBT semantic layer, or knowledge graphs layered on top of your data warehouse.
Yeah, I love the Ouroboros image. It's such a good point, and like I completely agree with you that the value that we can put into making our DBT projects or our data projects good data sources for LLMs, if that's really, really good documentation. Is one of my favorite things that I've ever done is when I was doing the first experiments with the text to semantic layer and seeing how adding a good description into the column and changing nothing else started to make the questions be good. Because it's like, look, we all love to write great documentation, and we all know 100% of the time all of our stakeholders are reading our documentation, right? No one has ever not read the documentation that we've written. But the one thing that we actually can be sure about is if we build these systems right, the LLMs will be reading and consuming this documentation. So it actually matters a lot more in this world to have that documentation, have that in there, and then. Yeah, I think I continue to be really excited about the semantic layer as the additional layer of trust and security on top of your LLM querying of your data. Talking to people about this, it's looking like right now people are interested in a both and, right? In that sometimes you are going to want to have like a more freewheeling conversation where you're able to go and like be like, ooh, like. Show me, like, dive in on that. And so the picture that I'm starting to see, which this is super early, but talking to some of the early people that have been trying out the DBT MCP server and what they're interested in, I think that we're going to start to see, so it's going to be a broad set of stakeholders that have access to a kind of like more governed and more locked down version of this, and then the people that you want kind of in there going and get deep in the guts of their data will be able to kind of go and be like, okay, now I'm going to fail over to SQL, I'm going to go do the SQL, and then I might upstream that back to the semantic layer, but just having it be a full loop. Okay, we talked quite a bit about AI. I think we will talk quite a bit.
Can I just add one small story to the documentation topic, because I wanted to share that because we built the chatbot on top of our technical documentation. Mm-hmm. And in the first week, our engineers started to use it and everybody was, oh, it's not good. It's really not useful. And then I sat down with the team and we started to really go through it. And I asked the question, so is it a technology problem? Is the LLMs, are they not good? And after, analysis, going through many things, we just realized that our documentation is simply shit. So of course, like your chatbot can only be as good as your documentation is. So yep. I think for us, that was also a good learning to improve our documentation. And I think now it's at a decent level, right? But I think sometimes people forget that, it's not magic. If your documentation is not good, neither will your chatbot be.
Yeah, it's like not only do the fundamentals still matter, but the fundamentals like probably actually matter more in this world because they're getting more like, if no one's reading your documentation, I'm not saying no one was reading your documentation, Yannick, but certainly I've written documentation that no one read. And, in that world, then, maybe I'm a little guilty of having it having it sleep. But when my good buddy Claude or ChatGPT or any of the other is out there reading it, then I want to make sure that I'm getting it good for them. That's a great story. Thank you for sharing that.
Humans can compensate and adapt. If the documentation doesn't answer it and they need the answer, they're going to go find another person who can tell them the answer and get that information some other way. But the chatbots, the LLMs are a lot more limited. They really can only get what we give them, and so we have to put a lot more care into the systems that we are creating and documenting and modeling.
Yes, exactly right. Exactly right. Okay, so that's probably the area where things have changed the most. Now I'm going to do what I call the recurring segment of being like, data quality. We're still working on it. So yet again, data quality has been the top issue for data practitioners. 56% of respondents say it's a problem. Anecdotally, everyone I talk to says, I'm always working on increasing the quality of my data. It's also, data quality is a very big and broad term that can mean many different things. So the thing that I want to work through with you two is what do we need to meaningfully do as an industry such that the 3 years from now version of this conversation, we've actually meaningfully moved that number?
Who do you want to go first?
For me, data quality is purely a process problem, and it cannot be solved by technology, right? So for me, why do we have bad data? It's because we have a bad process, and we need to fix the process. And of course, technology can sometimes help in fixing the process, but at the end of the day, it's a process problem. So for us also, data quality, we try to detect data quality problems early on so that we can feed back and correct them where they should be corrected, or improve the process so that the data quality issues are not happening in the first place. So I think a lot of companies are struggling with that because they're struggling with processes, and it's not an uncommon thing. And I also don't think this will go away quickly, or any tools can help you with that. I think the tools can help you to detect it, but not really to resolve the data quality problem itself.
I absolutely agree. It's a people and process problem, and that's where I think paradigms like data mesh can come into play, because there's only so much that analytical systems can do with the data that they are provided as the source. And a lot of the data quality issues are coming from upstream. And so this is where concepts like data contracts are really helpful. But if you're applying those data contracts at the analytical system, it's often too little too late. We need to shift that as far left as we can go. And so part of the change in how you organize your company that data mesh encourages is bringing your analytical systems closer to your operational systems and organizing by domain. And so if you can, if your company is producing that data, then you really have the opportunity to get closer to the actual source of that data, to bring all of the great data observability tools, data quality testing, and bring that to the source and say, hey, the data that you're providing me, it has these issues, and we need to fix this at the point where data is being collected. And so by bringing your analytical systems closer to your operational systems and forming a more cohesive system where you're not separating them out as fully, then we have that opportunity to improve data quality at the source. Now, there's a lot of organizations who do not have that luxury and are getting data from someplace completely separate. And that's where, again, I think if you have that ability, the scope of the data team and your responsibilities will need to start to expand. If you are paying for data, If you are getting data from someone else, some other organization, and you are paying for that data, then the data team needs to be in the room when that contract is being written and put some specific SLAs into the data quality. And so that way you have leverage when you are monitoring that data quality and you see that your tests are failing consistently on this particular issue. You can go back to that provider and say, here, in this contract, you agreed to these specific SLAs. They need to be fixed, or you can actually enforce the consequences. So I would love to see data teams kind of expand their scope to reach as far left as they can get to where the data is actually being collected, whether that's in operational systems within the organization or being in the room when the contracts are written and making sure that data quality is a priority from the very beginning.
Got it. Okay, so this is a hard problem to solve. It's not monocausal. We need to shift left and get data practitioners closer to the source. We need to focus on process. We need to give the data team a seat at the table. You can't fix bad data after it's been given to them. There are certainly ways that this can be addressed, particularly within your own data system. So it's like, you can't fix bad data, but you can not introduce more problems, and things like the DBT mesh paradigm are very helpful for doing that. And so via a collection of making sure that the data team is integrated in from the early days so that the data that comes in is good, and then following both process best practices and architecture best practices like DBT mesh, then we don't know for sure, but that's a reasonable case that 3 years from now we can be like, okay, we as an industry have made substantial progress on data quality. Buy it?
Yeah, and I think we're making progress in solving the issue of data quality, but part of that progress is making the problem more visible. So I think data teams probably have a better handle on what their data quality is like now than ever before.
Yeah.
Through the observability, through putting in those data quality tests into place. And so where previously that was just noticed at the very end when there was nothing you could do about it, we're catching those issues further upstream. We see them, we have statistics around them. Now we need to actually use that data to drive decisions that will improve said data.
Okay, so feeling on the pain. Go ahead, Diddy.
Here I also have a quick funny note because I just yesterday had this conversation with a colleague that was saying he has 0 data issues, and I asked if he's checking, and he said no, but nobody is reporting any incidents. And then my second question was, okay, how many people are actually looking at this data and using it? And he couldn't answer. So I was like, okay, maybe you should check the adoption. And then if you really have nobody reporting any incidents, then I'm proud of you. But I fear that, there's no data quality issue raised because nobody's really looking at the data at all.
Okay, so that's how we fix it. No, is we just have people not looking at data. But from that perspective, what I'm hearing from you is this is actually a good thing. People care about data quality because they're using the data. We have better tools than ever. We're kind of in the adolescent phase of getting there, and might be a little painful right now, but it's actually that's super interesting. Okay, we could probably keep this going for 5 hours. I think that our attendees maybe we can get people to stick around for the whole thing. But this was a really, really helpful complement to the report is kind of our quantitative deep dive. This is the qualitative kind of what we're seeing in the field, what's changing, what's not, all that. Before we go, I want to get from each of you, bring out your crystal balls. Man, I gotta get an actual crystal ball for next year. What are your predictions for the coming year in analytics engineering and the data space? I will start with Jenna.
This is always a hard question because then you're going to come back next year and ask, okay, did that actually happen? I think that so a lot of people have been saying that this is the year of AI agents. I don't think a lot of people really know what an AI agent really is because we haven't defined it and figured it out. And so this is where I'm going to bring one of my favorite domains, one of my favorite topics into play, which is semantic web. In 2001, Orlissa and Tim Berners-Lee wrote a paper on what AI agents would look like using semantic web technologies. And while the semantic web got developed out, used to great effect by Google in particular with schema.org, that's how those little knowledge panes work, is under the hood. There is knowledge graphs at work in our web pages. We are going to see what that looks like applying knowledge graphs to our data systems and actually having true semantics and reasoning capabilities with ontologies. I think we have to bring that into our more traditional tabular relational data systems in order to achieve the results that we actually want with the AI agents. So I think it's once again a matter of going back to the foundations, bringing in the technology that was already developed out but now is applicable in new and wonderful ways, and maybe we'll get some useful AI agents within the next few years if we can do that.
I love the grounding in history and like bringing it back to the early theorizing around this, and now we're actually making it a possibility. Awesome. All right, Yannick.
Yeah, I think somebody smart once said the best way to predict the future is to create it, right? So I think for me, I can maybe refer to some of the things that I'm super excited about that for sure we will adopt big time. One is, of course, all the new things that are going to come with SDF. So I think in DBT we will see a lot of improvements, when people are developing at scale, because I don't even want to check how many DBT models we parse and compile on a daily basis. But I mean, this is, of course, a waste of time. If we can really focus on the core part of analytics engineering, I think that will benefit us all. So I think there's a lot of maybe boring aspects of improvements that we will see, but for me, they're actually super exciting. I'm also extremely excited about the Visual Studio add-on that is going to launch. Because it also helps to be flexible on the ways that the developers are working, right? So I think it will give them a great opportunity to embed DBT the way they see fit in their workflow. Again, the LLM topic, I think DBT Copilot, understanding the entire code base with our standards much better. This is also something that I hope to see, that I'm pretty sure will happen. We already started to introduce also in our merge requests LLMs. So I think in the entire DevOps cycle, I think we see a great opportunities to improve that. I was not so successful with applying hard SQL fluff rules in the past because I got strong opposition from the developers. But I think now I can bring them back indirectly with, nice explanation on why it should be like that and whatnot. And maybe then also the adoption will get better. So the overall code quality will hopefully also improve. So I think there's many aspects on the LLM side that I see hopefully in 2026 are reality. And of course, beyond DBT, I see LLMs also taking center stage in the BI world, where chatting with your data is going to be something what people want to do. Although I'm also there a bit skeptical because I'm a visual person, so I like my dashboards. And of course, I also want to chat with the data, but I think this will not go away. So I think it's just a nice addition that we will see emerge also, hopefully over the next months.
Awesome.
I'm also super excited for what SDF is going to bring to the table. the SQL comprehension, that it's going to improve the developer workflow to such a huge extent. And I'm a fan of determinism. I like my computers being deterministic. And so we talk about how AI can improve developer workflows. I really like the deterministic systems that can improve our developer workflows, like what SDF has developed. And yeah, that preview that we got on Developer Day of the VS Code extension and what you can do with the SDF capabilities incorporated into that, like, I cannot wait. I want to use it now.
Oh man, we love to hear it, and a lot more coming on that very soon. In lieu of specific predictions, I want to go back to what Yannick said at the very beginning of this, where he was saying that the upcoming year that we have ahead of us, it feels like things are more interesting and dynamic and alive in the space than it has, in many years. My prediction is a revitalization of things like more and more continued interest in things like local meetups where you can go and talk about things like this. If you found this conversation interesting and you're like, why won't my friends talk to me about things like this? First of all, probably you should get new friends. Where should you find those friends? You can find them at a DBT meetup near you. You can find them at Coalesce. You can find them at the DBT Slack. You can hit up I don't want to volunteer YouTube, but we're all in the DBT Slack. We all love to talk about this stuff. There's a lot of things to figure out. I honestly believe that the expertise that this community, this group of people has been developing is more relevant than it's ever been, and that we have more to do in terms of figuring out how to most effectively apply that expertise across the kind of set of technological, process, and cultural problems facing the organizations in the world. And that the best way to do that is for us to get together and share knowledge. So I'm going with the softball prediction this year. I'll throw some more testable ones down in Slack or something. But I just think that we're all going to have a lot of fun hanging out, solving these problems together. I'm really, really excited for both of you and everyone in the chat to get your hands on SDF, to try out these new AI workflows, and for us all to continue building this out together. So Yannick, Jenna, thank you so much for joining. Truly, it was an honor and a pleasure to have you talk through this with us. To everyone that joined on the webinar today, thanks for coming. Thanks for being part of this story, and looking forward to seeing you all, well, at many intervening points, but also at next year's show. So, and with that, we will. I will say thank you and goodbye to Jenna and Yannick, and then we'll just have a couple bits to close us out.
Thank you so much. See you at Coalesce.
Yes, thank you, and I hope to see everybody at Coalesce as well.
Alrighty, before you leave today, 3 things that you can do to continue this conversation. The first, if you're not already part of the DBT community, you should join the DBT community. Link in the Slack, go there, or link in the chat, to get to the Slack. Go there, talk about the topics that we've had today, and really just use this as a place to connect with your fellow people that are interested in these topics. Next up, let's talk about the 2025 DBT launch showcase. There's going to be a link in the chat. This is, I think, going to be a pivotal day in the story of DBT and analytics engineering. We heard some excitement about some of the things we'll be talking about there today. So really hope to see you all there. And then finally, just give us some feedback. Please let us know on what you thought about today's session in the Goldcast survey. Do you like it? Did you want more bad jokes? Just let us know how it went, and how we can make next year's even more helpful for all of you. Thank you so much for joining, for being part of this conversation, and see you all next year.